Any project that I take on now, I want it to be number one, I want it to be uncertain. And I mean, I really mean that. I don't want to take on something. I did literally a couple hundred marathons early in my running career, and I still love to run a marathon. But I don't step to the start line of a marathon and wonder if I'm going to finish.
Welcome to the Spartan Endurance Series on Spartan Up Podcast with host Johnny Waite.
Hey Spartans, I don't know where you are in your endurance journey, but Charlie Engle is going to have some great lessons for you on what's next. How do you determine what's next? How do you take on an adventure worthy of you? And how do you make sure you squeeze the most out of it? Charlie's taking on some of the biggest challenges in the world, so he can help every one of us figure out what are we doing next and why.
Today's episode of Spartan Up is brought to you by BetterHelp. Spartan Up listeners can save 10% on their first month by going to betterhelp.com/Spartan.
Hey Spartans, we're back, and as promised, I'm back with Charlie Engle. I interviewed Charlie recently about his path to becoming an endurance athlete and how sobriety played a huge part in that. Definitely go back and watch that episode. Charlie really made it very, very simple for how you can get your life on track and how you can help others in the process. So I'm not going to dive into that because he said it perfectly before. What I'm going to dive into instead is, Charlie, I want you to tell everyone about what is next. So anyone who doesn't know Charlie Engle, he's run across the Sahara Desert, 5,500 miles in 110 days. He has done Badwater, one of the hardest races on the planet. He has done every adventure race there is to do. Charlie, now you're 58 years old and you're taking on stuff that's bigger than any of that. So tell us what you're up to.
Man, thanks for that intro again. I never think about my age, so thanks for reminding me of that. So
You
no,
can always count on me for that. You're the only person I know who's older than me, so I have to do that.
Well, and I mean, I don't want to be a spokesperson for AARP here, but the fact of the matter is, there's no reason for age to be a limitation. And yeah, there are some races out there that might be difficult for me to still be like truly competitive, because there are just some, there's some 28-year-olds that are like, have rockets in their shoes these days. So as I've gotten older, I actually lean way more towards what I call cultural exploration anyway. So my mission is to continue to see as much of the planet as I can. And the speed at which I do it isn't really important. So any project that I take on now, I want it to be number one, I want it to be uncertain. And I mean, I really mean that. I don't want to take on something. I did literally a couple hundred marathons early in my running career, and I still love to run a marathon. But I don't step to the start line of a marathon and wonder if I'm going to finish.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, I might wonder what my time's going to be, but I know I'm going to finish it. And that takes away an element. Sometimes we all forget what it feels like to step to the start line and be going, holy shit, I have no idea if I can actually do this. That is a gift of a feeling. It's a gift. I don't care if you're starting a business or a family or doing a race. That's the best feeling that you can ever have, is not knowing if you're capable. So this project that you're talking about, I call it the 5.8 Adventure Series. And in essence, I'll keep it brief, we all go through this lifelong journey of low places and high points. And never has that been more true than in the last year or so. And everybody's in that boat together. So I decided to put a literal spin a couple of years ago on this idea of lowest to highest. And I made a commitment that I was going to go from the Dead Sea, which is in Jordan, swim across the Dead Sea, run 2,000 miles across the Arabian desert, get in a kayak at the tip of Oman, paddle 1,000 miles across the Indian Ocean, beach my kayak in Mumbai, India, get on a mountain bike, ride 2,000 miles to the base of Mount Everest. And then it's only like 2 or 3 miles left, it just happens to be, straight up. So literally from the lowest place to the highest. And I call it 5.8 because even though it's nearly 5,000 miles from these 2 points, if you were to stack them on top of each other, it's only 5.8 vertical miles from the Dead Sea to the top of Everest. And you, where you are, and everybody watching this, no matter who you are, like we're all in this little tiny sliver of space that surrounds the planet, this 5.8 miles. We're all in it together. Everybody lives in there. So symbolically, I would like to think that it would help people realize that life doesn't have to be quite so divisive, and we need to be better stewards of this planet we live on.
So that is such a great answer to a question I haven't asked yet. And I mean that perfectly. The question that I was setting you up for was, when you're designing an adventure, and you said something earlier about an uncertain outcome is important. And that's why the first 5K that you run, when you've never run a 5K, that's an adventure, because you don't know if you're going to finish. You've never done one before, right?
Yeah.
And that first marathon, I remember is a big adventure too, because it's like when you cross finish line, it's like, oh, I did it. But as you go further along, that part of it disappears. The reason you did it in the first place, just to see if you could do it, isn't there anymore. And so for you, that's a big chunk of it, is to see if I can do it. And yet you've done so much now that even though, this is just an unfathomably difficult challenge you've taken on, I think you also know in the back of your mind, and I'm probably going to do it. I'm probably going to finish it. So you found another reason for it as well, right? It's not just to see if you can do it, because you're going to do it. But you're making it about more than you as well. So that's the question was going to be, when you're designing your next adventure, and I want people listening to this, no matter where you're at, you may have just bought your first pair of shoes and think, I want to go and run around the block. So you're designing your adventure from there. Or you may be someone you've done something with before who says, what's next for me? And they're thinking almost that same kind of level. What advice would you give to somebody as far as picking your next adventure?
Yeah, man, what a great question. And again, I do think, and lots of fitness gurus and life coaches have said this before me, but it is true. You People quit, especially where running is concerned, because running is uncomfortable.
Sure.
And the joke that I always make, it's not running that I like, it's stopping. Like running lights me on fire and makes my brain work better. If I could do every podcast and phone conversation while I'm on a run, that would be the best, because it's when my blood flow is great and I've got better ideas, and some of the ideas suck, but I mean, I'm just on fire, right? I mean, we all know what that feels like. You get great ideas when you're pushing your body. So I would just remind people to give it time. Like, set a goal and say, I am going to run, every day or 5 days a week, whatever your coach tells you, but I'm going to give this a month or 6 weeks, and I'm not going to judge it until the end of that period of time. Because if you judge it based on how you feel on day 4, you're done. Like you're not going to, your body is going to have this slow descent into discomfort, and then magically it learns how to handle the load, and it starts to turn around and go back the other direction.
Well,
So for me,
I was going to say that you look at life and how much we're trained that a good life is avoiding discomfort, right? So I want to get right back to where you were, but that's, so many people think that, when you go to a guidance counselor, they say, well, if you study this and you do that, then you'll be able to have a comfortable life. And they don't get that it's the other side of discomfort is where all the best stuff is.
Yeah, well, okay, I'll take our kids, for example. And a lot of the people listen to this, I think, probably have kids, and I do this with audiences, or I do it if I'm doing private coaching. I'm like, okay, do you want your kids to have an easier time than you did growing up? Like, a lot of times I'll know somebody's story and they had a rough go of it when they were young. Do you want to? And they'll say, yeah. And I'm like, why?
Sure.
Why do you want it to be easier? Because look at you. If you look back at the things that are the most formative in your life and what made you who you are and made you able to get through hard times, it was because of the struggles that you had. And parents want to, and coaches sometimes want to clear all the obstacles out of the way and make it a smooth path. And the problem is, the second that person finally does hit a real bump in a race or in life, they don't know what to do. They've never seen it before, because all the hurdles have been moved out of the way. So I believe in creating your own hurdles. Like, if somebody else doesn't put on something that is going to make me cry, then I'm going to figure out a way to do it myself. I want to go back to your original question. I do want to say this, though. My motivation has changed through the years. When I did running the Sahara many years ago, The side benefit, the true legacy, Matt Damon and I created a foundation called H2O Africa. And to be honest, man, I just wanted to see if I could run across the Sahara. I wasn't thinking about being some philanthropist or saving the world. I had the mission to see if I could be the first person to ever do this hard thing. But as a side effect, we created this foundation. I ended up raising $6 million during and just after my run. And now today it's called water.org, and water.org is the largest. We have $2 billion with a B in funding, and we're the largest clean water nonprofit in the world. I didn't set out to do that, but that's the far more important legacy than some knucklehead running across the desert. You know, my quest was personal, and that changed lives. So this 5.8 expedition, I want to do the same thing, but I don't even know what it is yet. Like I don't actually know what the longer term mission is going to be, but I want to like put legs on this view that we all struggle, and we all go from low places to high points and back down again. And like, you should never make a big decision. Like if I say anything that means anything, I think it's this: never make a big decision when you're at your lowest point.
Yep.
And I actually also don't make it when you're at your highest point, because you know what? Those two places they're not real.
Sure.
They only exist in a short period of time, and they'll pass. Even the worst times in our life, don't quit the job or the relationship or quit the race, not in that moment. You might do it later, but don't do it when you're right there, because that's the moment you feel hopeless. And if we just let that moment pass, it will, and we'll find our spirits lifted again later, and we'll find a way to move past the hardest thing. So I just want to see more cultures. I'm doing this 5.8 thing because I'll cross every ecosystem on the planet. I'll be in, I'll have so many cultural experiences that I have never had in my life yet. And I'm not climbing Mount Everest scares the crap out of me. And there's nothing better than to be scared like that.
So tell me about when you see this happening now, because obviously it was put on hold with like everything else, and you don't have a crystal ball about when the world's going to open up. But your prognostication for yourself, when do you see taking this on?
Yeah, and I'm not a rich man, and needless to say, anybody can see that, that's going to be an expensive undertaking.
Sure.
So I actually started this series in 2019 because I realized that to start with Dead Sea to Everest was going to be a big lift,
Sure.
and getting sponsors on board, and I'd like to make another film, and all this would be hard. So I started smaller, and in late 2019 I actually went 2,500 miles across Africa. So I went from Djibouti on the coast, a lake there, all the way across Ethiopia, Kenya, and Tanzania to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro. 2,500 miles, and and it was this amazing experience for me, and I filmed it, and so I'm editing that still at this point. But last year, 2020, I planned on Australia, Europe, and South America. Those were my 3 expeditions. So my hope is that I can get at least one of those done in 2021. So to really answer your question, I think the best guess is that 2022 will be the year for Dead Sea to Everest, for starting it. And I probably won't summit Everest till 2023. But you know what? What else have I got to do, man? I'll be 60 years old then. Maybe I can really bring my AARP card out there. Maybe I get some discounts, along the way.
Well, I'm glad that you're staying well in the meantime. And the other thing that you said there that I think is just a great note to leave this one on is you said, I started for this reason, and then man, this is what came out of it. And so, like you said before, you don't want to start something knowing you can finish, right? Because you want that adventure. So that's the microcosm of this thing. I want to start it, and then finishing it is the joy. But you've just taken it to the macro, and that is that, man, when you start this thing and you finish it, that might just be the start. You have no idea where that's going to lead. And just on a personal note, I think back to, I started running in 2009, did a 5K, saw people doing marathons, thought I'd like to see if I can do that. That seems like the pinnacle of human endurance. And, within a couple of years, I was traveling all over the world, meeting people like you, doing amazing things. And so the cool thing with that is that thing that you take on that you don't know if you can do, and there might even be a little discomfort in it, you have no idea where that's going to lead. And like you say, with the Sahara, that's led to $2 billion in water funding. You're making it literally changing the world. And now you're taking on something that much bigger than that. So I love that when you get to the finish line and you put the Charlie Engle flag at the top of Everest and say, I'm done, you're just starting.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful way to put it, man. You said it very eloquently. And I think that look, there's way better athletes than me. There's always going to be a better runner. There's always going to be a better athlete. Like, we know that. That's the nature of life. And so if a person's mission is to prove that they are like the best at something, hey, more power to them. I could care less about that. And I like to be good at things. But what I want to be considered is honest. I want to go do something. I want to share the hardships, the struggle, also share, those moments where I'm like, yeah, this is actually worth it. But I already know those moments, the moments I look forward to are the ones when I'm encountering other human beings. We don't speak the same language. We're in some remote village in the middle of India, and I'm seeing their different life, probably harder life than mine, but we're sharing laughs and smiles, and kids are coming out to run. I gave myself goosebumps even. Like that, because I know that those are the things that I will remember. The ego part of it, yeah, I got an ego, totally freely admit that. And that helps to drive me because I want to accomplish things. But it really is about, as they say, it's about the journey. It's about experiencing all those things along the way and not being so focused on the final goal that's the only thing that matters, because that's the least of it. That's the least of it, is getting to the finish. The rest of it is what's important.
Awesome. Well, hey, what's important to me is staying in touch with amazing people like you, because you inspire me, brother. Anyone who wants to stay in touch with you and be informed about the things that are going on, I'm sure you don't have an actual website for 5.8 yet, because that's still to come. But where can they follow Charlie Engle so that they can be kept apprised of things like that?
Yeah, man, thanks for asking. Just my website is the best place, and it's just charlieengle.com. And actually on there is a 5.8 tab. You can see a cool video on there that'll freak you out. All my social media stuff is on there if you follow those sorts of things. And, again, I try to use my social media as a way to be funny. I'm way more interested in being funny. If I can get a laugh from somebody rather than a clap, I'll take the laugh any day. But charlieengle.com is the best way to kind of keep track of what nonsense I've gotten myself into next.
Awesome. We're going to put that in the show notes. I'm really excited about the nonsense you're getting into. I'm going to follow it, and I look forward to our paths crossing again. And in the meantime, thanks so much, brother, for taking the time, for spending some time with us. And you're changing the world. You really are.
My pleasure. I look forward to seeing you in person sometime this year.
And we will. We'll do that.
Today's episode of Spartan Up is brought to you by BetterHelp. Spartan Up listeners can save 10% on their first month by going to betterhelp.com/Spartan. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Endurance Series on Spartan Up Podcast. Spartan Up is your partner in resilience for mind, body, and spirit. We're here 3 days every week. Tuesdays, you can find Joe DeSena, founder and CEO of Spartan, interviewing biohackers, business leaders, authors, and athletes. Thursdays and Saturdays, catch episodes from our DECA, Endurance, Trail, Combat, and La Ruta series. Do you know someone who needs a little nudge? Maybe they could use some motivation, tactics to be stronger, healthier, happier, more successful. Tell them about our show. And if you're watching on YouTube, leave us a comment. We want to know who's watching and who's listening. Thanks. See you next time.